Hi, and welcome to the 2020 Economic Recession and Preparation channel. I'm your host, Tony. Thank you for joining me once again for this episode. And today we're going to get right into it. Today we're talking about another Federal Reserve Chairman, the president of the Cleveland Federal Reserve Bank, Miss Loretta Meester, comes out and says that recovery, quote, will be a slow one and more economic support is needed. So despite the record highs on the Dow Jones and the Nasdaq and the S&P 500, it is clear that Main Street is suffering behind the scenes and that Wall Street is putting on a facade that this economy is not as weak as everyone knows it is. Miss Meister continues saying there is, quote, there is more pain out there than we're going to have to support the economy through. I think accommodative monetary policy is going to be very important throughout this recovery. In other words, QE5 and QE6 is coming. Quantitative easing, more stimulus for the big banks, for the big corporations that were deemed too big to fail back in 2008 and 2009, the Great Recession. Remember that? More of that is coming. The Federal Reserve Bank will have to keep supporting the economy because the recovery from the sickness pandemic is going to be a slow one. And what that looks like, they're going to have to take their time to evaluate that. But they said that they will continue to have accommodative monetary policy. In other words, free, cheap money that's not worth anything because the dollar is losing its value. I don't know if you've looked at the dollar index, but it has lost more than 25% of its value in the last 2 months. And it will continue to slide. Many economists, experts think the dollar will continue to fall to abysmal levels. This is part of the reason why when you have an economy that's based on not manufacturing, not human production, not actual value, but based on nothing but stock buybacks and fake recoveries. We never recovered from the 2008 crisis. And now here we are some 12, 13 years later, still struggling with the same problem. Earlier this year, the Federal Reserve Bank slashed rates to zero as the pandemic forced the U.S. economy to shut down. The central bank also launched an open-ended asset purchasing program, along with other measures to support the economy. Meester pointed out that high-frequency data examined by the Fed shows economic activity has slowed a bit since the country started to reopen. It slowed a lot because a lot of places haven't fully reopened. A lot of states fully haven't reopened. And she said that it's definitely true that when the economy started to reopen, you saw better data on hiring and you saw activity increase. But I think the virus sort of is driving things right now. Well, it's not the virus' fault that we're in this situation, that we're $27 trillion in debt right now, not including unfunded liabilities. It's not the city and the state's fault that they have to rely on the Federal Reserve that only wants to give them cheap, worthless money, loans that have to be paid back, rather than serving as a job creation vehicle for most American families. They only serve the top upper 1%. That is what the Federal Reserve Bank is there. And they're inflating our money supply away to zero, zilch. They're inflating us away to Zimbabwe and Venezuela conditions, to Weimar Germany conditions. This is what's coming, ladies and gentlemen, hyperinflation. But first, before we get to the hyperinflation, we're going to have a period of deflation, a deflationary period in these states, as prices are going to be forced to drop as no one has any money to consume, because you remember, 2/3 of the United States economy is based on consumption. That's over 70% based on consumption. There is no production anymore. All that's been shipped to China, Singapore, Thailand, Russia even. And now that the pandemic cases have ballooned to more than 6 million and with more than thousands being infected daily, that costs money to treat. Hospitals and cities and counties have to put out money and resources to treat. As a matter of fact, today on MarketWatch.com, there was another article, Main Street uncertainty, still astronomical despite this boom in the stock market. It's toxic for the U.S. economy. So Main Street, have you gone to these stores now that have gone out of business, such as Pier 1 Imports? Everything must go. Everything's on sale, a blowout sale. Furniture stores are going out of business. Clothing stores are going on liquidation sales. You notice that? The only things that they're building in these towns now, and this is including small and mid-sized towns and big towns, is gas stations. You notice that? They're only building gas stations that are owned by foreign investors, such as Russian investors, and they're only building food places. That's the only, in storage places, public storage places. You know, the storage places that you use, that you put some storage in when you're moving apartments or moving houses. You put some stuff in storage, or you keep your boat or stuff like that in storage. That's the only three things that they're building now as construction. And of course, more high-rise condo and apartments that nobody's going to live in for $3,000, $2,000 a month, that can't afford to live in that. So Main Street is the lifeblood of the U.S. economy. And if Main Street is hurting, this whole economy is going to go down, because there comes a point of what they call diminishing returns. There's only so much Apple iPhones that can be bought in America. There's only so much MacBooks and toys and other amenities that can be bought. There's only so much social media advertisements that can be consumed before nobody's buying anymore. And when nobody's buying, that's when the depression is part of the reason why the depression is going to happen and have such a severe effect on this American economy. Now, Mr. Bloom is one economist, and he says that one reason there's such a wide gap between Main Street and Wall Street is that the Fed has done a fantastic job in stabilizing the economy, and that it has a very positive effect on asset prices. He's referring to the asset bubble. That means housing prices are still high. Why are housing prices still high when we have an economy when half the people, 50% of the people, can't even afford the houses in these cities to move in and to sustain the mortgage for a long time? It's because the Federal Reserve Bank has inflated these asset prices in order to serve the rich, in order to take care of the top 1%, upper 1%. As you know, majority of these condos, apartment complexes, and even some housing, single-family housing subdivisions are owned by these rich, ultra-rich management groups. They buy up, private equity firms come in and buy up all that, and that's what they're serving. And another reason why what goes up must come down. And so they can keep interest rates to zero, but eventually they're going to have to rise interest rates. It may even go negative for a time, but they're going to have to rise interest rates. And when they rise it even 0.5 or 1% higher, guess what's going to happen to all of the stocks, bonds, treasuries, and the U.S. economy as a whole? It's toast. It's finished. Because not only the Federal Reserve, but politicians were more concerned with corporate profit than human lives. That's why this whole mess is going down. And so forget about a V-shaped recovery, forget about an L-shaped recovery, forget about a K-shaped recovery. It's already predestined that the United States will be going into the next second Great Depression. And what makes it so bad is that we were once the leaders. We were once the leaders of economic freedom back in the 70s and the 60s and the 50s. Those were the good times. Those were the good times of America. And now, here we are, the laughingstock of the world, as we surrender all of our production, surrender all of our human capital, surrender all of our common sense to China, the world's next superpower. Or the world's superpower, arguably the world's superpower already. So let's prepare, guys. Let's continue to prepare. Those of us on Main Street, let's band together. Let's save more for a rainy day. Let's be more self-sufficient. Let's grow our own food. Let's learn how to hunt, fish. Let's learn how to sew our own clothes to be more durable, to last through winters, because the winter is coming, and it's coming for you and I, and it's not going to be a pretty sight when you see a lot of your neighbors and friends out of work, or even if they're working from home, they're too scared to go out because crime is going to be unbelievable, so much so that police departments are not going to even respond to half the calls like they were doing in Cleveland, Ohio. They weren't responding to petty calls of domestic violence and crime and petty crime because they said they were overwhelmed. The system is going to become overwhelmed, just like this economy. So continue to prepare, whether you're in New York City, Chicago, LA, DC, Houston, Florida, Minneapolis, anywhere, the Midwest, wherever you are, continue to prepare. Blessings to everyone, and I will see you very soon. Please remember to subscribe to this channel and tell your friends to do so as well, and I'll talk to you very soon.